Welcome to the show, everybody. I am back on Martinis with Scott. I know what you've been asking yourselves is, Scott, where the hell have you been? It's been 3 weeks since you posted any content at all. It's even worse than that. The last show with Mark Grew, which is a terrific show on selling your business. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But that was posted 3 weeks ago, but we shot it 4 weeks ago. Truth is, I've done nothing for a month. Let me tell you the story. I'm sorry to bore you with this, but it's been a crazy 4 weeks or so for me. On May 25th, it's an important date. By the way, no martinis today. This is a morning shooting, so or an afternoon, midday shooting of a show. So I'm not drinking martinis, still on coffee. On May 25th, I decided to leave my self-isolation in my beautiful house on a isolated property in British Columbia, Canada, where I sit on a mountain and everything is peaceful and beautiful. And I thought, well, I'm going to travel back east. I'm going to get to Toronto. I'm going to stop by the office where there's nobody working right now because everybody's remote and isolated. But I have something I need to do. My main mission was to get to a company by the name of Novanni Stainless, which is a sink manufacturer, which I'm going to come back to later. And what I needed to do is we were in the middle of due diligence. I couldn't hire anybody to do an inventory count, which is a big deal when you're trying to take over and invest in a troubled business. You need to understand the inventory. There's a lot of bad accounting that can happen in the inventory, and someone just needed to go test some stuff. And so I thought, well, I'll go do that by myself. But the real reason is I thought, we've been self-isolated for a couple of months at that point, maybe 3 months, I guess, mid-March to mid-May. And someone within my circle of influence needs to show some leadership and say enough is enough. And COVID's starting to wind down. Think again back to May 25th. I know we've got a second wave right now, but someone needs to sort of get on the horse, get back to work, if I can mix those metaphors, and show a little bit of leadership within my organization. So that was, as egotistical as that sounds, that was sort of my mission. And so May 25th, I went on the long journey. And for me, to get from where I am to get to Toronto was about 12 hours, no matter what I do. There's a 2-hour time change in there, but it's a long drive, and then a wait at the airport and a flight, and then a long drive a lesser drive at the other end, but still somewhat of a drive. And so I went through all of that, and I got to my place in Toronto. And what I found out when I got there at midnight or whatever time it was that while I was traveling, George Floyd had been murdered, and the entire world, because that was May 25th, that's why that date is important, the entire world went into protest and then into riots and looting, and things were on fire. And from over the next couple of days, from a business perspective, next weeks, from a business perspective, nothing was getting done. The whole world was frozen, it felt like. So we've gone from doing nothing in COVID to doing nothing because of this murder, and for good reason. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying that's happened to be the day that I was traveling. And so, and my family's back out west, so I'm just sitting in Toronto in the east by myself, in a house, unable to do anything. And it's not like the restaurants and bars are open, so I can't go out and have a drink or have some dinner or anything along those lines. And for good measure, I throw my back out substantially. Like, it was bad. It hurt a lot. I'm just laying on the floor. I'm missing my family. And what I found is I've thrown my back out when I was in my mid-30s, and it was a big deal. It was a 3-month ordeal. But what I don't recall, and maybe this is an age issue, is I just got super tired and my brain went foggy. And honestly, I was sleeping like 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day, and just my body's trying to heal and using all its resources for that. So there I am. I'm laying on the floor. I'm sleeping. I'm not getting any work done. I'm away from my family. I'm living off Uber Eats because I have no other way to get food or groceries. Listen, my situation is fine, but I wasn't shooting shows. That's what happened. I wasn't shooting shows. And so through all the middle of that, I finally got up to Levani. I did do the inventory count, and I suffered and got back to the west which sort of re-aggravated my back because traveling is horrible. If you've ever had to experience that, it's, just getting in and out of cars and sitting in a plane for 4 or 5 hours, and not being able to move or get up and stretch, and the support of the seats is terrible. So anyways, I got back here to the west, and I just kind of relaxed for a week or two and tried to recover, and then I had to go back to the east again, because this time I was closing on Novanni, and I had a client in the townships of Quebec, and I needed to get there and visit them. So I got back east. I was still struggling. Got up to Novanni, did the closing, introduced myself to the people up there, and again, we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then I just could not deal with the thought of taking my rental car from Novanni, which is about an hour and a half north of Toronto, is where their manufacturing facility is located, and driving back to Pearson, which is the Toronto airport, parking my rental car, getting on a plane, flying to Montreal, getting a rental car, getting a hotel, driving off to the townships of Quebec to deal with and visit this client, and then back and sleeping overnight in the hotel again, because there's only one flight a day, because the flights are operating as normal. And so I just thought, to hell with all that, I'll just drive, because it's about a 5-6 hour drive. So I left and I went on the drive, but I forgot about construction, and long story short, that was about a 10-hour drive, and I arrived at about 2 in the morning, and then I couldn't find a hotel or motel forever. And so there you go. I've had a rough 4 weeks or so when it comes to trying to produce content, but I'm back. We got the podcast studio up and running here in beautiful Fernie, British Columbia. Hopefully you'll find the sound is working well, and we'll be back to our weekly schedule, or sometimes twice a week if we're doing quick shots on Tuesdays. All right, enough about me. What's the number one question I get these days through that whole story is not, how are you, Scott? Are you feeling better? Nope, that's not the question. The question is, what is it like to travel? So let me just tell you, on the first trip on May 25th, it was weird. It was weird when you come out of self-isolation in the country. And I don't know if it's the travel itself that is weird, or just the fact that I've been hanging out in a country home and really not seeing anybody. And I've been so used to, I travel 3-4 times a week. I'm on an airplane in the normal times, airplane or a car or some mode of transportation. And so anyways, it was weird to get going. I had to have all of my protection equipment, so my personal protection equipment, so my masks and my hand sanitizer. And when I got to Calgary, you don't need a mask in the airport, but you do need a mask to go through security. And then when you get to boarding, you need your mask again, because on WestJet, I assume it's the same on Air Canada and all airlines, the masks were mandatory at all times on the plane. They take your temperature with like a laser gun as you're trying to board, and it flashes on her screen either green or red. And of course, I guess if you're red, you're just out. I don't know what they do about that, but everybody was green, and just for fun, I said, hey, what was my temperature? And she yelled out in the line what my temperature was. So I don't think they've dealt with the privacy side of this yet. But anyways, so you get boarded. Now your mandatory masks on the plane. I'm sitting in business class. Business class, think back to May 25, business class was full. So you're just sitting beside somebody like normal. And you go back to the economy, when you take a look back there, there's literally 3 people on the rest of the plane. There was just nobody, which, felt weird, but it makes total sense. At that time, only business people were traveling. No one was taking an economy flight for fun. And then you ask yourself, well, why did I pay all this money for business class? Because there's no service, right? The staff is just, the attendants are sitting up front of the plane, and they're protecting themselves with social distancing. And so you're not getting food, you're not getting drinks. I mean, they give you a little prepackaged bottle of water on the way in the door. You get a hand sanitizer wipe to wipe off the seats and all that sort of stuff. And you just sit there. And then when you arrive at Pearson, unlike Calgary, that's in Toronto, unlike Calgary, masks are mandatory all of the time in Pearson. So you do that, And then you go to the rental car place, which for me is Hertz, because that's, we try to get the points and I'm a gold member and all that sort of stuff. And of course, they filed bankruptcy the day before I got there, which really shouldn't impact operations, but it did. There's nobody on the call centers. They didn't have anything organized, so that was a bit of a weird experience. And then, I get to downtown Toronto, which is has been home for me for decades, and it's just deserted. It's operating at maybe a quarter of its normal busyness. If you see pictures, I've been seeing pictures of Fifth Avenue and around Manhattan. It's the same sort of thing. It's like watching that movie, The Devil's Advocate, with Pacino. And there's scenes, I think it was up Broadway, where there was just nothing. Anyways, it feels a lot like that. Now, as time goes by, so when I flew back about a week later, things were busier. And when I flew back west, and then when I came to Toronto again 2 weeks after that, economy was pretty full. There was nobody in middle seats, but the rest of the seats were taken. And we had a hard time getting tickets because there's not as many flights. And so things are picking up rapidly. You still have the mask issue. Every time I get on a plane now, there's more service, right? So they're starting to serve you more and more things, which is cool. So things are getting back to normal. But I had the weird experience flying back on WestJet. I got on the internet, which worked finally, and I was doing a bunch of work. And over my feed on my computer came the announcement that WestJet was restructuring and laying off 3,500 people. And I was the only one on the plane that knew it, and including the flight attendants and the pilots. So at one point, everybody was gathering, all the staff, all the employees of WestJet were gathering around my computer, and we were talking about that. And it was an odd and not so happy experience. So that's what it was like to travel for me the last few weeks. I will say the world just seems to be slowly finding its way back to normal. And I suspect that impacts business. Things are starting to pick up. I can say in the businesses that we own, we're just knocking it out of the park. We're actually above budget now. Things are going great. Now we're in some essential services by good fortune. That's not good planning, that's good fortune. And even some of the companies that are outside of the essential services, we're starting to see things pick up. Slowly, haphazardly, but that's starting to happen. You're a business owner, you're an executive. What you need to consider right now, and hopefully you have been for the last month or so, is the financial health of your counterparty, of your customer base, the receivables you have. Are they going to pay you? Because that's what you're seeing is your customer base are starting to file bankruptcy. They're looking to restructure. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about Novanni Stainless Inc. So this is a Canadian-based manufacturer of stainless steel sinks for every area of your home. They've been producing and manufacturing in Canada for over 60 years, if you can believe it. One of their brands is the Wesson brand. It's available through major retailers in Canada and some of the US, but the retailers would be, Home Depot, Home Hardware, Rona Lowe's, those sorts of people, which is completely synergistic with Roofers World that we've done a show on before. A whole different SKU. Roofers World, we make tools for the roofing industry, but we sell the same customer base, which is helpful. And at Novanni, they also sell sinks and strainers and related products commercially for commercial applications, and they do that through wholesalers. So they have the two channels. Novanni is located in a place called Coldwater, Ontario. Population, I think, is about 1,100 people, and Novanni employs about 50 people. So it's a significant business within the area, and I assume, I don't know for a fact, but I think the 50 people grows substantially when the business is back to what it ought to be doing. Now, as you know, or may not know, my primary business is turning around troubled companies. I also help high growth companies and entrepreneurs with management and transition to get from where they are to where they want to go. But I invest in, I loan to, and I advise troubled businesses. And I do that with our own money at Sinclair Range, which is my primary business. And sometimes we accept partners, they want to financially partner on a deal because they like to invest in this sort of space and they want to work through a partnership with us or with me on this sort of thing. And so I think 10 days ago now or so, closed, and so I purchased Novanni Stainless as a troubled business. And what I hope to do, as much as I can, I've never tried this before, so you need to bear with me, but what I hope to do is take you on the journey of the turnaround of this Canadian manufacturer for over 60 years that, importantly to me, employs a bunch of people in a small town in northern Ontario, mid-Ontario, really not north. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of Toronto. It's about half an hour north of Barrie, Ontario. So whatever you want to call that. Anyways, it employs a bunch of people in a small town. It's an important industry. And what I hope to do is share some of the journey of the turnaround and the investment from my perspective and how we try to affect change. So let me give you the lay of the land. I'm going to try not to give you actual numbers. I'm going to try not to disclose something that can hurt us competitively, but I'm going to try and give you as much information as real information, authentic is the word I'm looking for, information as I possibly can. So Levani is a long-time manufacturer, and long before COVID, for years, it was in trouble. And it was in trouble because about 50 or 60% of its business was wiped out by low-cost Chinese imports of stainless steel sinks. Now, the quality sucked of the Chinese imports, but what Novanni failed to do under this pressure was to respond with cost cutting. It's a fixed cost business, and people that are stuck in their ways and have been doing this for a long time don't really want to affect change quickly. And so they weren't cutting costs fast enough. They weren't restructuring their business fast enough. And so that would be on the defense side of this pressure from the Chinese issue. And they weren't building a brand. That would be the offense side. How do we fight back to these low-cost Chinese imports? And the answer is to build a brand. And so they weren't doing either of those things, and they lost about 60% of their top line. And of course, they started reducing their price, which hits their margins. We've talked about my formula for making more money in a business, which is contribution margin, fixed costs, so your overhead, and then your top line third, and you attack them in that order. So they started getting squeezed on their margin. So that's what was going on years before COVID hit us, and then COVID hit, and that took about half of the revenue that was left of this business. So it lost 60% of its normal run rate to the Chinese imports, and then lost another half of what was left to COVID, which you think ought to be a temporary thing, and it ought to grow back out, and it sort of is, but not very quickly. So that's what was going on in operations. They have a senior bank in Canada, a Schedule A bank. I won't drop any names of this due to confidentialities, but they had a typical operating line, which means it's secured over everything, owned by the business, but really the margining, the availability of funds for the bank is tied to accounts receivable and inventory for the most part. And the bank was not happy with their loan, and they've been trying to get out for years, and the company hadn't paid them back. And so they were talking about receivership before COVID came. And then in COVID, they ramped up their aggression on this issue. And you would think, you've read in the press that, banks are concerned about the reputational risk of shutting down businesses during a pandemic, that they're overwhelmed with their own issues, and all that stuff is true. I've been on webinars saying exactly that. But what's also true, and the reality is, if you were a troubled business that was on their radar before COVID, and then things got worse during COVID, they're going to come after you, right? If you were a good client before COVID, and then things went bad during COVID, and there's reasonable prospects that you'll go back to be a good client afterwards, they're probably going to work with you if you're fair and intelligent about that conversation. So that wasn't the case at Novanni. Novanni was on the radar before COVID, and the bank started ramping up the pressure on that. And I should have said that, we were in discussions with Novanni long before COVID. We did due diligence probably, or tried to do due diligence 3 months before we closed on this deal, maybe 4 months. And so that puts us sort of a few weeks before we signed our first memorandum of understanding, a few weeks before the pandemic actually hit. So they got the senior bank, they got a receiver coming up the road, wanting to put this thing down. And if this goes into receivership, what happens is operations stop. All the people are terminated. They don't get any severance because severance is an unsecured debt in this, so ranks behind the bank in this jurisdiction and in most jurisdictions. So they get their pay and they get their vacation pay, but they get no severance, which is a big deal for that town and for these people and for these families. So now we're doing due diligence. We're trying to do it during the pandemic, and usually, excuse me, we ought to be able to do this relatively quickly. But this company, like so many, stopped doing its accounting. So there we are in February, March, April, May of 2020, and the books of records of the company had not been reconciled since, it turns out, June, July 2019. The controller left, the company didn't replace the controller, they got people doing accounting who are not accountants, and it's just a mess. And here's a little hint for you on dealing with troubled companies. If you're in trouble, you need to change. And if you need to change, it's really good to change with real information instead of no information or fake information. Invest in your accounting department. You need good information. And also, you're going to need to attract more capital. You're going to need to attract investors. You're going to try and sell your business. You're going to try and do something to get you out of the trouble that you're in. And if you don't have good financial information, you can't do any of those things. You will not survive due diligence, which was exactly our problem with this company. All right, so due diligence, first secured bank. They have a second secured bank, which in Canada is a bank, but it's also a crown corporation. And they're lending, they have a second secured floating charge over all the assets of the business, but they also have a specific charge on the equipment. So basically they loaned on the manufacturing equipment. We have two shareholders, one of whom is absent and retired, one of whom is the general manager and running the business. They both have personal guarantees to both of those banks. They've owned it a long time. The company in a separate corporate body, the business owns its real estate, which has environmental contamination issues and all sorts of litigation, etc., going on with that. And they also own a bunch of redundant real estate off to the side, which is not contaminated, and that's part of the package of what we call the Novanni group. Unpaid suppliers, of course, so a bunch of, in my world, what we would call unsecured creditors. And operationally, particularly during COVID, the business is losing money every day, but not too much money. You'd be surprised. I was surprised. It's I don't want to say it's break even, but it's not far from break even. It could easily be at break even pretty quickly. So that's sort of the lay of the land. Sounds pretty negative, sounds pretty scary, and it sounds like time urgent, and all of that stuff was true. On the positive side, they make a great product. The sinks are great. They fit well within the marketplace. There's synergies with the distribution channel, with the sales channel that we use with other businesses that I have. And I think globally, on a macro level, there's just an unstoppable movement, I believe, or at least it's my hypothesis that I'm betting on, that an unstoppable movement to decouple from China and to onshore manufacturing. And I would rather onshore to the US, of course, but I'm happy enough to have it onshore to Canada as well. And the US thing, we have a huge foreign currency issue, foreign exchange issue in Canada. As our Canadian dollar dropped through bad management and bad government, it's really killing the manufacturing. We pay the US, we pay US dollars to the Chinese for supply, and we sell it in Canada and we get Canadian dollars, and our US supply, our US dollar commodity and our US dollar strainers and things that we're purchasing out of China, we don't get a price reduction sufficient to deal with the FX problem, is what I'm trying to say. We have the same issue at Roofers World. It's been a significant hit, but either way, this whole decoupling from China and the tariffs that are going to come in on these low-cost Chinese imports that are our competitors, I think are a big deal. I'm just bullish on the space. I'm bullish on Canadian and U.S. manufacturing, and this is a great fit for us. So how do I get myself in control of this company, benefit from the turnaround that I know can be done with my team, yet protect Sinclair Range, protect myself at the same time? So here's the deal. What I did first is I negotiated to buy the first secured debt from the bank. So you're not paying off the bank, you're not lending money to Novanni so Novanni can pay its bank. You're buying directly from the bank their debt in security. So the bank was worth X. I'm just going to make up numbers. Let's say the bank was owed $10 million, which it was not. This is a bit of a smaller business than that, but let's just say it was $10 million. I ended up buying the debt and security from the bank for 50% of that. Okay, so let's just, in my hypothetical example, let's say I paid the bank $5 million. All right, so what I get is I get the debt. I send $5 million to the bank. Now I get their debt. So Novanni owes my company $10 million. Even though I paid $5 million, they still owe me $10 million. Okay, so there's the discount. And I get the security from the bank, which means I am the bank. So I have security over the receivables, the inventory, the real estate, whatever equipment is left after the second secured acts on their security. And so I've protected myself from any downside, any significant downside on this transaction. Now, what I could have done and didn't do is I could have taken that $5 million and I could have financed that with a new bank. And I had a new bank come to me and say, hey, we want to do this. We want to work with you. We love working with you. You guys do a great job. And so I wouldn't have had to pay $1 to buy this out. But we were in the middle of COVID and the accounting sucked. And I don't want to be associated with putting together a deck and a presentation to a new lender where I'm not confident on the accounting. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pay this myself. We'll just send the money. And a month from now, when things are a little bit more stable and the information is correct, I can go to that new bank or any other new bank and I can refinance this business and get all my money back. So that my net in on the first secured position is effectively zero, which is a great place to be if you're an investor. Now, so I own the debt, I own the first security, and then I bought the shares. I bought the shares of Levani. I bought the shares of the real estate companies. I bought the shares of the redundant real estate, and I own all of that. Sinclair Range owns all of that 100%, and we bought it for $1. Okay, and you think to yourself, well, how the hell can you buy something that's worth that money for $1? And the answer is, both of these principles, the people that own this business, what was their biggest fear? Their biggest fear, properly so, is personal guarantees to the banks. Personal guarantees to the banks and what that means on their family, because the truth is, if the bank put in the receiver and if the number was 10 million, which it wasn't, it's a hypothetical example, but if the number was 10 million, they're not going to get their 10 million out of the receivership, which means what? It means they're going to go back to the personal guarantees and they're going to go after these people's homes and that it's going to affect their family, and it's a terrible situation that no one wants to be involved in. That's their biggest fear. They've made the mental shift, which at some point owners of troubled businesses need to do, from we're going to be able to save this thing to we're in serious trouble here. So my deal was, as it often is you have a personal guarantee to the bank. I'm the new bank. I will let you off that personal guarantee. I don't want your house. I don't want to throw your kids out. I want you to be able to eat, right, and live your life and go on to new things. I will release you from the personal guarantees, which I did, and you give us the shares. So we own the business, right? So I don't have to fight you on this. That's the trade, and that's what these fellows did, and they did it not only to protect themselves, but to save jobs, because their alternative was that Bank A walked in, because they agreed to this up front, obviously. I wouldn't have bought the bank out if I didn't have this agreed. Bank A would have put the receiver in. They would have been calling their guarantees. There would have been no jobs left in this community. So I'm owed the money from the company. I have the first secured debt, and I have all of the shares. Cool. So that's a way to get in. I've got the upside, and I've protected myself. The truth is, if I liquidated this thing the day after I closed, because I got the redundant real estate, I would have got out, and I would have got out with maybe 15, 20% upside in, say, 3 months, okay? Which is not the end of the world for an investment, but it's not why I'm in this business. You know, that's what I'm in this business for, is to save jobs and create tremendous upside. So the last big deal that we did of a similar nature, you know, I got in for maybe all in about $200,000. And it was a much bigger deal, but as I said, we got another bank to leverage that for us. So I couldn't have spent money on it if I tried. I get in for about $200,000, and over the course of 5 years, if you were to figure out back of the envelope, which I don't spend a lot of time on, but our annualized return was about 500% a year, right? So like 2,500% return, real, not compounded, over 5 years. Crazy numbers, but that's the margin in doing a turnaround. You step in these things for very little, and you create value rapidly by affecting change. And so that's what we try to do. That's why people like to invest and partner with us. And that's the business, right? But you got to be good at it. You got to be able to protect yourself, and you need to be able to affect change. So just to put some context into what this business is all about and why we try to do it. All right, so we've been through that. So now I own it, I protected myself. My next issue is always who's going to be the turnaround leader, which is going to be me, but how the hell am I going to do that? Because it's hard to travel. It's hard to travel. I can't sit there the entire time. I'm president or chief restructuring officer of, I don't even know, 6, 7, 8 companies right now, which is pretty moderate for me. Often it's a lot more. They're throughout Canada and the US at the moment, and the UK. So how do I spend this time? Well, Zoom, if COVID's taught anything, is we can do a lot on Zoom. So that's been cool. But also the shareholder that was working as general manager, he has stayed on as general manager. He's got a 4-month contract. It's a transitionary contract, and he has the opportunity during this period, and I like the guy. He's been really helpful and he's been productive. So, but he has the opportunity to prove that he is receptive of change and of making money in this business, and that we need to do things differently. And so far, so good. So we've set up a communication. I have my team in there. I'm the turnaround leader, and that's the backdrop. That's the backdrop for how we got into Novanni, how we structured this deal, and I think you'll find, if you go back on the Martinis with Scott channel, you'll find some shows about how to structure and invest in a troubled business. This hits some of those highlights. You need to understand your pecking order in terms of who has priority over the assets and which lenders do what. By the way, in my story, I forgot to tell you, I didn't deal with the second secured bank yet, and I didn't deal with the unsecured creditors, being the suppliers that haven't been paid for years. But I can now drive that bus in terms of negotiation because I rank ahead on the pecking order. I'm the first secured creditor. I am the bank. I want to come up with a fair solution, but if I can't, I can put this thing through a receivership myself, keep it operating, put it into new corporate body, and me, the employees, the customers, and the suppliers that we choose to keep all win, and everybody else doesn't. Right? That's the way bankruptcy works, and so that's not a threat to these unsecured creditors, but that's just the math. That's reality. At the end of the day, troubled companies never forget it's about math. It's not about negotiation. It's here's your value, here's your cash flow, who shares in it. That's what it's about. So I doubt we're gonna get there. I think that we'll have a reasonable solution for everybody. The environmental's a bit of a question mark. That may drive something. We'll find out. Anyways, so that's the story of how we got in the door, and it's the story of what I'm thinking about from a turnaround leader perspective. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert into this I recorded my opening speech when I was there. Now, please forgive me, be patient with me. I could barely stand up because of my back. I hadn't had a haircut in months. I was sleepy and in pain, but I did my best, and the recording's not great either. But it's not my usual self, happy self. And so I'm gonna cut away, and you're gonna listen to my opening speech, which really ought to be focusing on positivity and the fact that we save jobs and we're gonna be moving forward. This isn't about going backwards, it's about moving forward, which always needs to be the message in a turnaround, and that it's a meritocracy. We need to perform, okay? So you're gonna listen to that now.
My name is Scott Sinclair, and as of this morning, I am the new president and owner of Levani. Okay, so we're calling you all in here to give you that news, talk a little bit about what happened and where we're going from here. For over 30 years, my business has been working with troubled companies, just like Novanni, to turn them around and to make them a success. Businesses exactly of this size. In fact, my primary business, my company is called Sinclair Range. I'm the founder, president, and we're in New York, Toronto, Calgary, and we work all over the world. And the exact reason that we are in business is to parachute in and help companies just like this, including in operations and management and on the finance side. So that's what I do for a living. And the natural question that you ought to have for yourself is, wow, is Novanni a troubled company, right? Because I don't think any financial information has been disclosed to you guys. You probably have a feel for what's going on. I think probably a lot of you have been around here for a long time, and if you have, you might tell us that production has been maybe double what it is today, maybe more than double what it is today. So you've been seeing over the years, how many years? A decade? A slide, right? A negative slide in the business. You all know that. You all feel it in your souls. But it's been a slow slide. It's been slow because your products are great. The products that we make are fantastic, and therefore there's a demand for them. But the reality is that we've been losing. We've been losing to China. Okay? We've been losing to larger competitors. We're losing to the market. We're not keeping up, and it's in a negative direction. And when you combine that with the recent fact that COVID hit, which causes a financial strain on everybody, and it happened for this company at the exact same time that Levani's bank was giving Frank and Ron, as owners and guarantors, a really aggressive hard time to pay them back because they wanted out, because they saw this negative direction. All of that adds up to, yes, this was a troubled company. Not as much from the operations side, but from what in my business you would call the balance sheet side, from the financial, right? The checkbook wasn't working on this company. So, what I've done, what Frank has done, I've stepped in and I fixed this problem in the sense that I personally paid the bank off, and we're done with that. We are stable, we have resources, and at this point, what I want to say to you is, I want you to thank Frank, and I want you to thank Ron, because what these guys did was they took a bullet, and it was really hard, but they did it and they saved your jobs, to be blunt about it, okay? They took a step back. Okay, now we're going to be working together with Frank going forward. His role is unchanged, okay? I am the new president. I'm the president of at least 6 companies. I don't even keep track of it anymore. And they're in different places in the world. And I don't live here. I'm from here. It turns out we used to play hockey together in the same league when we were kids. Right? I grew up in the country in a little town called Frankfurt. I don't know if you guys ever heard that, just north of Trenton, Belleville area. But I now live in BC, so I have to travel to come here. The bottom line is, certainly in the early days, I'm going to be here as often as I can, because this is important to me, and we need to make changes to get this company moving forward. But Frank is in the same position. The way I work, I don't have business cards today. I'll have them when I'm back here Monday. I'll get one to everyone that wants one. I want you to have a direct line to me, okay? And I don't want you to get hung up on reporting structures and who does what and any politics, because that's all crap. I'm not dealing with that. You got something to say, my job is to listen and to fix the problems that are here. Today's a new day. We have a new lease on life. The bank is gone. We're stable. We don't have unlimited resources, but we have a little bit of resources. Okay, and we need to be smart, and we're going to be fine. And we're going to succeed. I believe that momentum is the most important thing in life, and therefore in business. And it's the key to any tournament. You need to change the direction. You need to change the momentum. We're all taught from kids, from being kids, that the strong get stronger and the weak get weaker. Science is called the Pareto effect, or Pareto, I never know how to say that word. And it means the same thing. The entity that is attracting resources just keeps attracting more at an exponential rate. The people or the entities that are losing continue to lose. And you see it everywhere in the natural world. You see it in the galaxy. You see it in economics, right? The 1% get richer, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. We see that all the time. It applies in business. We need to stop that today, and that's what I mean by changing the momentum. How do we do that? We do it through small wins. We just start small. We focus on what's important. We change the things that we can change, and we do it together. I believe in empowering everybody. And here's the thing: 30 years, I've walked into troubled companies, and not once has it been a mystery as to why you're in trouble. Everybody knows, right? If I have to talk to every one of you, you all have some input as to how to make this company better. Anybody disagree? Everybody agree? You've all got ideas. Your job is to tell me. My job is to listen and to execute and to force that change, okay? I worked at the company the last, I started November 18 and finished the end of 2019. I said to give me a year. When I stepped into that company, I won't tell you the names or anything like that, because it's not my company, but they were losing $6 million, and within a year they were making $2 million, okay? And now they're going to probably do about 5 or 6 million profit this year. Why? The same thing, stopping the direction of change. They were in manufacturing, much like us, more process oriented than we are, but they're in manufacturing. They had bad fill rates to similar customers. They had production shutdowns. This is not going to be as complicated, but if we pull together and we work as a team and we focus on winning, just winning, it doesn't matter what it is. You need to start a culture of winning again and not kind of going backwards every day. Things are going to be great. We have saved jobs. We need to focus on our team. And if you want to work for me, what you need to be is positive all the time, because you can't change your habits. You can't change the direction of the company with negativity. You need to let go. What I always find is in a group of people like this in a troubled company, there's a core group that are positive and want to be happy, and there's some others that are negative. And some people can just never get over it. They've been so beaten up from the troubles of the past that they just never come around, and there's no home for that, because you can't move a company forward. So I urge you to think about that. You need to be positive. You need to have some hustle, right? Changing and winning is about having some hustle, and you need to have integrity. What do I mean by integrity? It means that we talk honestly to each other. We speak openly to each other, and we respect each other. That's what I mean by integrity. Okay. What do we need to do over the next month or so? I want to meet individually with each one of you. I don't know how that schedule is going to work out, but and I want to hear it. So you have some time. Think about it. In your position, what you see of others, what would you do differently? What are the problems here? Get that information to me, because again, you already know the answers. We're just not doing it. It's not being pulled together. Okay. So we're going to do that over the next month or so. It may take a while, as I said, because I'm not always here. But for now, we're going to hang out. We're going to have some pizza. If you have any questions right now, throw them at me. If you want to come see me sometime, do it. As I said, I'm going to give you my business card. You can call me directly. You can text me, email me, whatever you want to do. Frank, anything to add to all that?
No, we covered most of it.
There you go.
This one.
What
What the hell's that got to do with the speech? The original plan was, yes, we're going to shut down that week. However, good news, we received about 2,500 sync order from Home Depot yesterday. So that may force us with the first deliveries on the 29th, next week, or the 10th, right?
30th, 29th and the 30th.
29th, 30th, and 10th. So I'm gonna tell you right now is at least the Monday, Tuesday that week, we will be working. At least, and possibly the Thursday, Friday. Canada Day on Wednesday, we will not.
How fast are we gonna get supplies?
How fast?
Say it again.
How fast are we gonna get supplies?
Raw materials.
Well, that's just parts. Like in strainers, we have no parts.
Yeah. I'm guessing that's a cash issue. I don't know. Might be a bit of a planning issue as well. So, you know.
Keep getting running out of stuff.
Yeah, the first question I asked Frank when he was giving me, I've been here a few times, but I've never actually seen the production going because I was here on Fridays or what have you. Produce. You need to produce. You can't not produce because you didn't have the parts or the supplies or something broke down and there was a safety issue. So attainment in production is always a great metric for me in these situations. So I don't know the specific answer to your question, okay, but it's high on my list, obviously.
And if there's 2,000 orders, things, if we can't make a strainer, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, exactly.
And we can't make a strainer.
Yeah.
Mine's more of a comment than a question. Thank you for allowing us to keep Frank as our general manager. We're all very comfortable, and I quite enjoy working for Frank. So thank you, Scott, for doing that.
And Frank?
Maybe he doesn't want to.
Thanks for staying with us, Frank.
I can't stress enough how hard of a time this was for Frank. Can you talk about Ron? Difficult time, right? So you need to be empathetic. I'm empathetic about that. You guys need to understand that.
It's
And
difficult for us too.
I bet.
Well, why, if we didn't know who we were staying or leaving?
Because no one's ever talked to you about this, right? So what I'm telling you now is you're stable. Okay? Doesn't mean we can continue losing, right?
No.
It doesn't mean that if you're not you need to be on the team or not on the team. If you're on the team, we're good. If you're not on the team, I have a short fuse for that. But we're stable. You're not going to not be paid because we ran out of money. That's not going to happen. Simple as that.
Anything else? Anything in mind? Go ahead.
To you, Frank,
Yeah.
are we back on 5 days until we get this?
Not yet.
wrapped up?
I would say not yet. I would say, yeah. I would say next week for sure. But after that, we'll have to.
So I
see
should go
what
buy
the
that
numbers
brand
are
new
gonna be.
vehicle and be able to pay for it.
What's that one?
What was that?
I said, I can go buy that brand new vehicle.
Don't buy the new house yet. But we'll get there.
You still figured out your phone, haven't you?
I still haven't got it.
Really?
Oh.
That's been 3 weeks now.
No, it's been 2.
Anybody else? Anything
All right.
else? Yeah.
Again, you don't save up your questions for now. Anytime.
Okay.
Thanks, Julie.
What do you got, Angela?
Thank you.
All right. Hope you enjoyed, or hope you got something out of that speech. What else can I tell you? I think I'm done for today. I will tell you that having been beat up the last few weeks and having my back issues and all sorts of things going on, I changed my morning mantra from my usual of I'm going to be positive today, I'm going to hustle and act with integrity. I changed it to this message, which I've written on my whiteboard in big black letters. There it is. That was the JPEG. If you're listening, that was the picture of it. And if you're listening on the podcast, what it says is stop fucking losing. Thank you for listening. And by the way, that's really worked for me. I sit down here every morning and I look at that and stop fucking losing, and I stopped. This show is about winning momentum, and we're back on track. It's exciting. Thanks for listening. Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in life and in business. Please subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and we'll see you next week.